Hello, this is Tammy from the App Garden. I wanted to spend just a few minutes to talk to you about a new enhancement that we have and maybe some functionality that you may not be aware of. But in the travel tracker, it is possible to create recurring identical trips. Now, these would be typically used for trips that are the same trip, going to the same place, on a regular interval. So, for example, maybe after school trips that leave at, 3 and come back at 5 every day. And so, let me show you first how you create the trip request using that option. So when you submit a request, say for example a athletic trip or maybe a special needs trip that is recurring, you set the first date to start with. So let's say I'm going to put this starting on Monday, October 2nd, and it goes from 3 in the afternoon to 5 in the afternoon. Okay. And so what you'll notice is recurring identical trips. And when you click on that, it gives you the option to set the additional dates. Now you can only do this when you create the trip initially, set those recurring identical trips. So what will happen is the trip will actually go through the approval process as one trip, and when the trip is approved, it will actually be split out into different trip numbers. So let's say, for example, the first date was the second. So let's say we're going to do this every day through the month of October. So I can select those dates. If I have a dates in November, I can continue through that. So we can select as many of those as we need to here, even going into the next year. And so you can accept that at this point. Now I can still continue even after that. All the dates I've selected are listed out. I can still continue up until we, submit this trip. We can continue to modify these. So if I need to remove one, I can do that, or I can continue to go back and add until, maybe add a couple in December until I get the dates that I want. Now remember, everything about this trip has to be identical: where they go, the times. Now once the trip's split out, you could individually change one of those trips, but the intent of this is to make it easy for you to deal with those recurring identical trips that happen on regular intervals without having to submit an individual trip request for each one of those. Okay, so I've selected on this trip my location, in this case transportation, and our destination, Green Hope High School. So all of these entries for this recurring trip will go to the same location, same funding source. Everything is identical on those. And so if I scroll further down, I'm also going to indicate the number and type of vehicle. So let's say I need 2 of these vehicles every day on this same recurring trip. Same as always, you indicate any special needs that you have on the trip. And so at this point, I'm ready to submit the trip. And you see it's trip number 22643. And so now let me just show you when we go in to approve this trip. Trip 22643 is pending location approval. Notice that there's just one. This is the primary trip number, the one that was originally created to Green Hope High School, needs 2 activity buses. So I'm just going to go in and just approve this so you can then see what we have. And notice when somebody goes to approve one of these trips, they can see all of the recurring dates that are involved with this trip. And so I'll go down and just quickly approve these. So once the final approval has been received, the duplicate trips have all been created. And so one of the easiest way, once you've created one of these trips, is to go to the trip request, and there's an option that says by destination recurring. So these are where you can find the recurring trips and what all the trip numbers are associated with that trip. So when I go in here, I'm going to choose my destination. So in this case, was going to the Green Hope High School, and then the batch ID. So in this case, there's only the one batch ID. Now the batch ID number is listed based on that initial trip number that was created. And so if I look at this, I can see all of the trip with the numbers here listed. So each one of those has that same batch ID that it relates to that original trip number that was there, but it has its own trip number. So this was the original trip, and then you can see that it has split these out: 22644, 22645, 22646. So at these point, they're all individual trip requests. But the challenge has been in the past is to then assign the vehicles and drivers to these trips. Typically, this type of trip, it's the same vehicle and driver most of the time on these trips. And so we've had a request to be able to mass assign the vehicles and drivers, and we've provided that. But I will tell you, in order to see that, you will have to select your destination, select your batch ID, and select that you want to see only the ones that need vehicles and drivers assigned. And once you select that, and you've got this list pulled up, you can then click to assign the vehicles and or drivers to the request. And then I can choose my vehicle number and my driver number, to this. So I can select those and then assign these. Now, this will not check availability of these. Typically, these are buses and drivers that are not involved in other field trips and athletic trips. So at this point, it is not checking for availability. And so we're basically going to assign the vehicle and driver to the request. And what you'll see is that this is going to assign it to each one of these trip numbers. Okay, so we very quickly assign the bus and the vehicle. Now, if you need to individually change one of these, that's fine. You can do that. You just simply click on the trip ID, and then it's just like any other trip at that point. It's an individual trip ID with individual vehicle and driver assignment. So if I needed, for some reason, maybe this driver can't do it that day and I need to change the driver, you do this like you would on any other trip, which is just to choose your driver and change the driver very easily. And so that's our recurring trips. I hope you guys will enjoy that, and we'd love to hear some feedback from you. Thank you.